Hey guys, first Guardsman here, so I'll be talking about the major changes coming to Siege Mode in patch 13, all the confirmed leaks we have, and the info we got in the community update about new bosses being added to the mode, and what I want to see from Siege Mode in the future, and how I think it can be improved for not only this patch, but Year 3 as well. Space Marine 2's April community update gave us an updated Year 2 roadmap that has officially moved out the release date of Space Marine 2 patch 13 to being Q2 of this year. They have refused to comment on an exact release date, saying that Q2 is all they can say. We do know the patch will not have a public test server, and Q2 puts the latest possible release window into June, though most players are expecting the patch to be in late May. But I'll be honest, I think this one could wind up coming out in June, because not only will that be directly after Warhammer Skulls, where we'll most likely be getting even more info on not just patch 13 but also Year 3, but also Siege Mode came out in June of last year, and this patch is supposed to be providing a major overhaul to that mode, so it makes sense to do that for a pseudo anniversary. And patch 13 in general is turning out to be significantly larger of a patch than we originally expected, so this could very well be the largest gap in patch releases we've experienced in ages. Back in the day, Siege Mode was the most hyped up addition to Space Marine 2's Year 1 roadmap by leagues and bounds. Everyone wanted a Horde mode for this game, and players were endlessly asking and speculating about this since the game's launched in September of 2024. Wave-based modes are already a staple of Horde shooters, and unfortunately, this one came out in a pretty mediocre to terrible state in patch 8, and even though Year 1 in general was pretty subpar compared to the content we got for this game in Year 2, the Siege Mode especially let players down with some serious performance issues and relentless crashes that sent you straight to the battle barge, and bugs like an invincible lictor that made it so you couldn't progress at all even if you didn't crash. A lot of these bugs are admittedly fixed now, and the crashes have gotten substantially better, but that doesn't mean the mode is perfect, and the mode in general has kind of been abandoned at this point in the game's life cycle, and the fact it doesn't grant the accolades currency for heroic weapons definitely did not help its longevity. But thankfully, we are getting a ton of new content for this mode, and we actually got a bunch of confirmed leaks for Siege Mode in the April community update as well. The first major addition I want to talk about though is the fact we are finally getting accolades from the Siege Mode, and we are also getting brand new requisition store items in the form of a new purchase bot companion like a commissar that can buff up your guardsmen. And thank God, because the Cadian guardsmen in Siege Mode are currently living out the lore accurate guardsman fantasy of accomplishing next to nothing and dying a horrific death in mass. Now, I've seen some grumblings and rumblings among the player base of Space Marine 2 asking what good a Commissar will do to buff up the Cadians. There were actually some leaked images for the Commissar icon as well, where he will supposedly instantly bring in guardsman reinforcements, presumably after the others have already died a pathetic death. But there was actually more to this beyond the Commissar itself, and that we were also going to be getting guardsmen with different weapon types at some point here as well. Focus and Saber previously mentioned this is an upcoming feature, and I don't want to put my tinfoil hat on here, but I would love to see things like Kriegsmen or the Steel Legion show up in this game, because those are some of my favorite guardsman regiments, especially after Yarg just returned to the forefront of Warhammer 40k tabletop, and the 11th edition trailer was centered on Armageddon with the launch box set. And even though we haven't seen Steel Legion on the tabletop for a while, I would love to see them show up in this game. But let me know which guardsman factions you guys want to see added to the game, or if you just want to stay as Cadians only. There will also be explosive barrels and explosive mines that are now officially confirmed from prior leaks and data mines. We even have an image showcasing the purchase icon for the explosive barrels. Now, how effective these will actually be, we have no idea. If they're the same as the normal explosive barrels in the game, then they'll be at best a gimmick, which it does kind of seem to be a running theme here with a lot of the new requisition store items. We know from leaks that the minefield will be purchasable from around the requisition shop, which I guess is supposed to make it easier for you to purchase items while you're under attack. But to be honest, that sounds pretty shit unless this thing one-shots Majoris around you, since Siege Mode can already get pretty hectic, and something that's underpowered in this aspect would be pretty garbage. Something I really want to see from Siege is an option to actually defend yourself with fortifications and stuff like that. When we look at other popular Horde shooters, or arguably the game that resembles this one the most with Gears of War 3 Horde mode, that mode really made it feel like you were actually defending a position and laying down traps or turrets to hold off increasingly harder waves. In the current Siege mode, it feels more like you're just running around and killing enemies until you die or they do, which is technically true for Gears of War 3's Horde mode as well, but the lack of proper fortifications or any real way to choke point enemies outside of a few niche scenarios, like shock nades in a corridor, it really does make it feel more like you and your teammates are just running around lacking any serious coordination up until there is a major boss wave. But that's just my opinion on this. Let me know what you guys think. Do you want more multi-layered defenses or something similar, or are you fine with the way Siege Mode works currently? The new map for Siege Mode that was supposed to come out with patch 15 has been apparently moved all the way into Year 3, since it's currently nowhere to be found on the updated roadmap. My copium is that we'll see the new map launch with this update in the Siege rework, because I really don't know how well a Siege mode rework is going to do if we're stuck on one map that we've had for nearly a year, and a new map could do a lot to address some of the things I mentioned here, like layered defenses, and maybe even give us some cool gimmicks like shutting off entire sections of the map or like other interactable map specific options. But even if we don't see a new map this patch, we'll see it in year 3 guaranteed, and one of the new requisition options I think will be incredibly popular among the player base beyond the Commissar is the addition of an Adeptus Mechanicus NPC companion. This is another one that was originally confirmed from data mines, but we were not entirely sure what the passive benefit for it would actually be, but Focus themselves actually gave us that info that he will grant you a currency boost, which could make him one of the best possible choices for Siege mode, since currency is incredibly valuable for purchasing things like a Dreadnought and other options like a starting spots. I did not expect a currency buff at all, and originally expected ammo regen, because the idea of an AdMech just magically crafting bolter rounds on the fly sounded pretty hilarious to me. But let me know how you guys feel about Mechanicus Companion. We just got the Tech Marine last patch, and we'll be getting in a starting spot for him in Siege mode as well, according to data mines. This will fit that perfectly. And beyond these, the biggest shock to me from the community update reveal that we had 0 prior leaks for was the addition of the Vortex Beast and Hive Tyrant to Siege mode. Now, I've had some time to think about these guys being added to the roster, and I've got a few thoughts. First of all, the Vortex Beast is a diabolical boss for most of the player base already, and even though once you learn his moveset, he's not too bad, he is incredibly prone to forcing the player into a defensive playstyle. His entire boss fight has so much shit that simply does not allow you to get off things like melee combos or actively forces your movement, that he could be a cataclysmic event for Siege mode. We already know that Saber has no plans of making Siege have a toggle for only Chaos or Tyrannus as a faction, so you'll just have to fight this guy no matter what at some point. And the Vortex Beast is a boss that is usually not surrounded by additional enemies like Rubik Marines, let alone Extremis, so if the Vortex Beast functions like the Hellbrute does currently in Siege mode, where they just throw everything at you regardless, players are going to get cooked. But I do have a sneaking suspicion that he might actually be mostly solo as a group fight, and they could potentially pause wave spawns during his boss wave, or make it a set amount of enemies like we see with his Operation Battle and the Hive Tyrants as well. And something that I think we might also potentially get here are actual execution animations for both the Hive Tyrant and Vortex Beast. Currently, both of these boss fights will end in a cutscene and a mission complete screen, and they don't actually have execution animations of their own like you would see with the Tyrannid Primes. And if we end up getting executes for these guys, I think that'd be a pretty amazing addition, because all the post-launch executes have been pretty top-notch, and I'd really like to see what they cook up with this one. Now, on the note of the Hive Tyrant being added to Siege, I mean, this boss is already loved by everyone, so he's welcome as far as I'm concerned. If anything, he's celebrated. The Hive Tyrant is still arguably the most well-designed fight in Space Marine 2, even though he's a launch boss, and even if he'll be significantly hard to fight in a horde, he is way more manageable than a Vortex Beast would be. I've also seen some players asking why we aren't getting the Tyrannid Primes added to Siege mode alongside these two bosses. Focus previously stated that the Tyrannid Primes are unlikely to be coming to other operations as on-mission spawns, and I assume that extends to Siege mode as well. The major reason for this most likely is that Tyrannid Primes will go out of bounds due to their flying, and also Tyrannid Primes are pretty passive as a boss fight up until they become enraged, and don't really have the same threat as the other bosses because of that. And maybe we'll see them someday, but for now they're probably going to be on reclamation only. Let me know how you guys in the Space Marine 2 community feel about the Vortex Beast and Hive Tyrant in Siege. I think this will be an overall welcome addition, assuming it's implemented properly, and the most unique addition coming to Siege mode though is something akin to a roguelike system. In patch 13, there will be new blessings and atonements that are going to be similar to stratagem modifiers with a bit of a twist. Every 5 waves, you're going to receive a positive blessing out of 3 options, and you will also receive an atonement every 5 waves as well, which will function as a negative stratagem. That is randomized and can be re-rolled using your Siege currency. Personally, I'm a big fan of roguelike, so this sounds pretty cool to me, and I think this could really help differentiate Siege mode from the standard operations beyond just being a 3-hour wave-by-wave battle. This is also on top of them saying that they are reworking the timer from the Siege mode as well, and this was something that they mentioned they planned on doing for ages. A timer in Siege mode is one of the most controversial things about the mode during its initial launch, and the main reason it existed in the first place is that the Siege mode would just inevitably crash no matter what at a certain point. So their way of putting a band-aid on this was just adding a timer that automatically ended the mission eventually, which effectively hard capped the highest wave possible on Siege and made it mostly a DPS race. Which, while that can be really fun, it's not really what players wanted from Siege mode, and kind of limited build variety, since whatever could clear fastest was almost always the best option. But now when the timer ends, all the enemies will rapidly increase in strength, which will presumably just force a game over by them directly killing you instead, which, while better than an auto game over, doesn't really sound a solve the core issue, which is the game crashing eventually, and both the timer and the enemies getting ridiculously strong to the point they kill you is all in an effort to make the game end before it ends itself. And I'm not entirely convinced they've actually figured out the performance issues yet, but we'll have to wait and see. Something else we had leaks for previously were some voice lines for what looked to be the siege mode talking about a servo skull escort, which could be for a new side objective or even the new siege mode map, since a lot of these data mines are for future patches, not just the upcoming one. And on the note of Heretic Astartes in siege mode, this has been the greatest hopium or copium of Space Marine 2's player base for a while now. There were leaks a while back for new Heretic Vultures and Injector voice lines for siege mode, and this had a lot of players saying we might actually get Heretic Astartes in the next patch this summer, but Focus has come out repeatedly and said they've been very clear on Heretic Astartes in Space Marine 2, and Games Workshop said no. And there are planned PvP expansions, so that's most likely what these weapons are for. And even though we have Warhammer Skulls coming up very shortly, which could have major reveals for Space Marine 2, I would just not get my hopes up for Heretic Astartes anything in this game, because there's really no reason to believe it's coming, and the only thing approaching evidence for this is a few leaked images for what are probably PvP weapons, and the fact that Space Marine 1 had a Heretic Astartes Horde mode as the end of its DLC content. But Space Marine 1 was not even made by Saber, and the likelihood of this is pretty much entirely a decision of Games Workshop, and they are exactly well known for letting this kind of stuff happen anyways. But that is pretty much everything I wanted to talk about in regards to the upcoming siege mode changes. I think most of the stuff here sounds pretty good, though we will likely have to wait and see how the roguelike elements are actually implemented, because that could become the most controversial part of this whole rework pretty quickly. And I imagine that when this patch launches, there will be quite a few major complaints from the player base, because this will be the first time we all get our hands on it since we had no public test server. But as always, I'll be covering all the new content, builds, and game modes on this channel when the patch comes out. If you want to catch me live to ask me questions about the game or just come hang out, you can find me here on YouTube or on Twitch with a link in the video description alongside a link to my community Discord. And as always guys, if you like content like this, subscribe for more. Thank you for watching, take it easy, bye.